All right, so if you've been watching my channel for long enough at this point, I think it's pretty clear that I take the way I train, my programming, and how I lift pretty seriously. And if you look a little bit beyond that, I think that says something else about my lifting philosophy that I haven't touched on the channel yet. And I think this should be pretty obvious to the people that have been watching my videos and this channel overall for a while. And that's about how far we can actually push bodybuilding. I used to believe that there was capacity that you could hit, what we commonly know as the natural limit, for example. I do want to touch a little bit on that today, but my philosophy with this, it all starts, I think, the natural limit idea. I think what it stems from is actually going to be fake natties. And this isn't going to be a video to call out fake natties or place blame somewhere else for why this is a prevalent mindset that we have in bodybuilding and hypertrophy training today. But it all starts somewhere. And I think with the emergence of enhanced lifting and PED and steroid use, it stemmed some almost black pill type philosophies and black pilled mindsets in natural lifters. And that's something that we maybe don't have when we first start lifting, but it kind of gets put on us, and our own perception, in my opinion, leads us to a poor mindset that's a little bit limiting and reinforces the idea that the natural limit is out to get us and it is a thing, which to push things further makes it so the methods that we use don't really matter, because whatever method we use will lead us to our limit anyways. So you can see it's a bit of a slippery slope where this mindset ends up leading to. And I think we need to deconstruct this from the back up. And that will get us to the mindset that is going to be more beneficial for natural bodybuilding. And ultimately, to put it simply, is just going to make us a little bit more optimistic as lifters. So let's dive into that first part about the fake natties. So at first glance, the natural limit that's pushed on us in the community by these fake natural lifters, also known as the people that lie about taking PEDs to make a profit off of you and get your views and your clicks. That's another way to view these people. And essentially what happens with these people is they need a coping mechanism for what they're doing. So when these people do eventually come out about their usage, they need a way to justify it to you, and more importantly, to justify it to themselves, because that's who they truly only care about. Explaining it to you is just to save their image and to make people view them in a better light. When they have to justify this, the simplest way to put it is just to say there's a natural limit. You hit your natural limit and then you take steroids. So not only is this a justification, this is a virtue signal from these lifters saying that they're more virtuous because they train hard enough to hit their natural limit and hit it quickly too, because they supposedly know so much and train so hard, right? That they're virtuous enough to take the risk, and they're high enough on a pedestal to be able to say that, oh, once you get to my level, you can take what I take and be virtuous like me and push past what the limit is that's already set for you. And unfortunately, that's something that's pushed on us quite a bit. I also think that part of it falls on ourselves as natural lifters. You can't just keep placing the blame elsewhere, no matter how bad the intentions are of these fake natty types. You have to take some responsibility for yourself. You can't just keep blaming other people. You can't have the victim mindset. Especially as a lifter, you should be actively fighting against that. When you take these fake natties, the mindset that naturally comes to us, no pun intended, is you start to believe there's a natural limit because you see fake natties that aren't that big. And you see that as already past the natural limit. So when you think that these people that are on gear are already past their natural limit, that's a misconception. And did these guys get faster results than they should have and gotten farther than they would have naturally with a poor understanding of training? Yeah, of course. I definitely do think that. That's why you can have guys on Instagram or whatever that are more jacked than they ever would have been, after 1 year of training because they took gear. Does that mean they're past their natural limit? I don't think it does, because there's always going to be an overlap. The most jacked naturals that have put their time and their effort and learned about lifting over the years these people are much bigger than those fake naturals. But the problem is, when we see a fake natural, you see an intermediate lifter that has gyno and back knee and doesn't lift properly. When you see a person that's bigger than that person, you are led to believe that, well, if this guy's bigger than this guy, now he's not natural, or I'm skeptical of it and not enough to truly believe I can hit that potential. And you see how, while it's good to be skeptical, now you're limiting yourself to the intermediate PED user, and you think that's the natural limit. And that's the problem, is that while steroids do get you those faster results, and they can put you higher than what you would have hit initially as a natural, there is always going to be overlap. The natural way is just a little bit more tedious. It takes a little bit more time, and you have to be precise. And that's why people like myself talk so much about the methods of training. It's much more important than, oh, you don't train hard enough, or use my methods, hit your natural limit first. It's a little bit more complex, a lot more complex. So moving on beyond the fake natties and our perception of these people, I do want to say that when it comes to the natural limit, the biggest lesson that I've learned in my time as a lifter is that muscle growth is not linear. And I know that's simple. And someone like myself, I couldn't stand hearing that, because I'm like, how is it not linear? I dedicate my life to lifting. I do the same thing day in, day out. I have no excuses ever. I never miss a session. Of course it's going to be linear. However, I was wrong here. And the reason for that isn't because I just had a crazy life change and I quit lifting. And that's not the reason why lifting isn't linear and your progress isn't linear. The reason why it's not linear is based on your knowledge. So you can lift with the same exact consistency and effort day in, day out, but as you learn more, that's going to speed up your results. And as you stop learning, you're going to start to plateau in your results. So even if you're putting in the same effort and you're consistent with it, that doesn't necessarily mean that your results are actually going to be linear. This comes down to your programming knowledge. And of course, yeah, there's going to be certain life situations where maybe you have times that are easier to train and times that are harder to train. But even if you're in an ideal situation where you can prioritize training and have everything fall into your lap perfectly, even then, you're still limited to what your knowledge is. And I think that's a big factor that we need to understand. And for someone like myself, where I'm a ritualistic person, it was hard for me to accept that life would get in the way. And I'm like, no, life is not getting in the way. Lifting is most important. Life is beneath that. Not actually, but when you have that consistent lifter's mindset like myself, that's kind of the way that we view it, even if it's not perfectly accurate. Another thing here is that you don't know what you don't know. Mystery is always going to be looming. And the problem with the mystery is it's not necessarily something that you just don't fully understand. It's a blind spot. You literally can't see it until someone else shows it to you, or until you discover it. Like, it's as simple as that. There's not a whole ton to elaborate on here. If it's a blind spot, you cannot see it. You might start to get hints of new things that you need to learn over time from other people or from your own experience, but you don't know what you don't know. It's a mystery. It's a blind spot. And it's something that you don't even understand. You don't even comprehend that you don't know about it. And that's the problem. And if you look at humans throughout history with anything, not just lifting, look at technology, we keep pushing the envelope farther. And it's going to be the same thing with lifting, maybe to a lesser extent, maybe not as exponential, but the same philosophy applies. We don't know what we don't know. In my opinion, we're only scratching the surface of our understanding on hypertrophy training. Even when you look at the most cited studies, a lot of these are flawed. And not to dive into a bunch of them right now, but we've all seen the studies on volume. And when you look deeper into those studies, maybe they weren't carried out in the right way. We look at all these just personal anecdotes and community experiences and everything. And most gyms that people train at don't even have machines that are designed properly in a biomechanics sense. You look at stuff like this and like, do you really think we understand everything about hypertrophy training? Do you really think we all have access to the ideal situation to get as far as we can in bodybuilding? I don't think so. And I don't think just having a slightly better machine is going to fix that. But that's a pretty tangible example of we're not as advanced as we think we are. Like, please, any of you, define the exact way that hypertrophy happens. Nobody can do it because we still don't know entirely what it is. We know the methods that work, but until we understand exactly how it happens in a scientific way, we're still pretty limited in what we can actually do. We just have to go based on experience and measuring results, which is fine and it works well. But I think once we truly understand how mechanical tension works and how all this stuff ties into biology, I think we're still going to be, to a degree, limited in our understanding of progress in hypertrophy training. Another thing here, and this is more mindset than it is physical, we have to stop focusing on, we've all seen that chart, 12 to 24 pounds of muscle gain in your first year, 6 to 12 in your second year, 3 to 6, 1 to 2, etc. as the years go on. This applies back to the linear philosophy of the consistency and the effort that I touched on earlier in the video. Comparing progress to time, it is a black pill. When you look at your progress and you try and equate it with time, that's an issue because you're looking at it in a glass half empty way, to put it simply. And I hate to be corny like that, but it's the simplest way to put it. When you say, oh, well, it's not quite worth it because it will take this much time, the reality is you don't know how long it's going to take because you don't know what you don't know. And that's kind of a theme of this video, is that the mystery is looming. You just don't know. And the same goes for anything else that you go for in life. Like, we put all of our effort into, say, your job because you know that promotion's coming. But do you? Do you know when it's going to happen? Do you know if you're going to get your promotion? It should be the same thing with lifting. It doesn't matter if it takes a year to build 2 pounds of muscle. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long it takes, because what, are you just going to stop lifting entirely? I don't think so. I mean, obviously there's cases where some people want to go on to maintenance and that's fine. But in my opinion, why would you give up before you have tested the waters and learned more and experimented more? It's a community and a knowledge base that's always developing, so you just don't know. We can try and make our best guess on what the future holds for us, but let's be real. Nobody's training is just linear in terms of progress. Unless you have everything perfect right off the bat in your training state, or your training just stays the same year over year and you don't actually learn anything, your progress isn't just going to be a complete, perfectly symmetrical diminishing return for the rest of your training career. It's just not how that works. Another point here is that you're not as advanced as you think you are. And I've definitely recognized this within myself. And it's as bittersweet as it is to understand that, the best thing about this is that you're realizing how much more potential you actually have. The best way to give yourself this mindset is to look back at a time when you thought you were more advanced than you are and compare that to now. And the easiest way to realize this is that it's the same thing now. When you compare yourself 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you're going to say the same exact thing. I hope when I'm 5 years older, I can look back at where I'm at today with my lifts and say, oh, I thought I was like an advanced bodybuilder back then. I was an early intermediate and I've put on 25 more pounds of muscle. And the reality is, that's always going to happen. We're always at our best as long as you're trying. And then every year you can look back and say, oh, you know what? I wasn't actually that smart, or I wasn't that jacked last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it is. That doesn't really end. The last point that I have for today is that most lifters, there are exceptions, but most lifters have not exhausted all methods. Most lifters are far too dogmatic, and we all have that to a degree, and we just haven't exhausted all methods. And even when we're so caught up in a community where we can get so skewed to one specific training method, it's very hard to pursue another method to its maximum capacity without that lingering thought of, I'm not doing what the community wants me to do. This is an experience that I've had over the past few years, going quote unquote against the grain with certain methods. I've kind of ditched the common lifts that we all look up to, the squat, bench, deadlift, and I've primarily been training with machines instead. I still do a lot of free weights, obviously, if you watch my training logs, but I've been taking that mindset that I've learned from the people that treat the big three like the Holy Grail, and I put that same exact intensity of mindset and proximity to failure and effort into these machine lifts. And I don't think a whole ton of people can say the same about that. And that's not to put myself up on a pedestal, but it's to tell you that there's methods that you've written off for a long time that have potential gains that you haven't received yet. And I've been there myself where I wrote off the leg press. And yeah, I would do it, but I literally called it an accessory lift in my program. I had my squat or my big compounds and then my accessories. So when you see the word accessory, which literally means something that is inferior or a smaller part of the bigger picture, do you think I'm going to take the leg press seriously, or do you think I'm going to go through the range of motion? Or not the range of motion, I'm getting tired. Go through the motions. I'm such a lifter, right? That's an issue. We need to be able to see everything for what it is and not through the lens that we currently have on. We have to look at things pretty objectively. And when everybody's calling isolation lifts accessory movements and machines accessory movements, and this is just one aspect. This is just a look into exercise selection, let alone frequency or proximity to failure, so much more. This is just exercise selection, a very tangible example for you. When you look at these aspects of lifting, it's hard to step back from the community and kind of do your own thing with strong effort. And the people that generally start to revolutionize and push methods forward and advance our